All right, same as before, I like to check the sound. So, assuming it's working, continuing with the lunch and learn while there's not anyone in at this moment. Got to answer some questions for faculty earlier. Same as before, I like to check the sound. Sound works. Cool. I've broken it before, so that's always fun. But for this video, starting now, we want to look at the practices of consistency, and then two new tools, resources that the learning community's leadership and partners and faculty brainstormed, and then I kind of synthesized some of these from that large practice, just to kind of draw cohesion a little bit. We'll see if I even did a good job. But these, we'll start with the basic, the standard existing foundational practices of consistency. This has been part of CGC's learning communities initiative or committee program for years now. And so these are four things that if you're part of a learning community, it is expected that you would do. So all learning communities at Chandler Gilbert, regardless of modality, format, or funding, are bound by the commitment of integrating these four practices. These are core features that every LC exercises and practices. And frankly, these are good things to do even if you're not in a learning community. So reaching out with a letter or an email before day one of class. And that it's meant to be fun. It's not like, here's what you've got coming up. Be scared, students. It's really meant to be a, hi, I'm a person, you're peoples, we believe in you. And so but it can be more functional. It can say what you've got coming up for the week is gonna, and for the semester is gonna be fun, but it's also gonna be hard work. Whatever your normal spiel is, but something to just introduce yourself and connect in a meaningful way with the other humans on the other side of Canvas or that email. Always good to reach out at least one day before the class. Sometimes we've sent my teaching partners and I have sent them out 3 to 5 days in advance, and even before we've published the Canvas shell. So first thing is just making sure people are known, seen, they feel like you're prepared, you're coming, and you're trying to engage with them on more than just a task-based interaction. So you lean into the relationship. Next is the integration of stackable HIPs after the first semester of partnership. So the idea of stackable HIPs, there's a bunch of high impact practices. And so the idea is that once you get kind of your learning community moving forward toward integration, you start thinking about things like service learning or increasing common intellectual experiences or co-curriculars. You think about collaborative projects and collaborative writing or capstone projects or e-portfolios. Any number of these can be used to stack the high impact practices and make them even more effective. So just starting to explore that after your first semester of partnership is one of the key identities, values of our program. And then recursive student reflection, having students rolling back over the things they're learning, how the partnership's benefiting or creating struggles or adding new dimension to their learning or their engagement with other students, just that recursive rolling back over, reflecting. And then assessment. You could make it gen ed or have it per separate discipline. It could be just looking at the LC as a whole. So there are layers to this. I have materials for assessment. We're going to do it for a workshop, and how to maximize that in learning communities. We're going to do that as part of our summer workshop LC faculty training series. So I'm sure that'll end up on this channel at some point, in some way, shape, or form. But those are the four big ones that were like, this is just part of the identity of the program that we have here at CGC. They've been around for years. They're not meant to be burdensome. Some of them are things we already have to do from time to time, and so just making it a regular practice. This next one, and apologies for all the text, but this is really about one of the bigger challenges that have come up. Now, teaching partners, when at least my mindset as trying to coordinate the learning communities program at my institution and trying to make sure I support faculty has multiple angles. On the one hand, I want to make sure that faculty are compensated as best I can get them compensated, working with the team of leadership that I have at any given point in time and advocating where I can. And the other side is just making the job easier, smoother, and more efficient. So part of building out and some work that we did throughout the year, some conversations with a variety of brainstorming sessions and multiple hours and a dozen faculty kind of thinking through things, is just this idea that um, sometimes when we are focused on doing something new, it can be scary, or it can just feel like there's a lot there, especially, or just it's just work. And sometimes learning communities can feel like more work. Some people say they should be more work. And so my hope would be that the stuff that is more work is actually that. So one part of learning communities, especially because the national conversation has seen a lot of programs kind of fluctuating with funding or remuneration and feeling like they're constantly having to advocate for more resources for faculty who take part in this high impact practice that can increase retention substantially, persistence substantially, and completion and success substantially compared to mainstream students. If there is a lot of conversation about supporting teachers so they don't get burnt out, so they don't feel overwhelmed, so they don't feel like it's such a burden to take on a learning community. And as someone who's taught in learning communities, I just really geeked out about them. So, and I tend not to think about those things. I just assume it's going to be fine, which isn't always a healthy model. So I'm not a good person to follow after. But what I can say is, once I got into the learning community, it was definitely clear where I could become more efficient with my regular teaching. And that doesn't mean, and not in like a, you need to do this, not in any sort of negative way, in a, wow, working in a learning community has so many benefits. I want to find a way to do more of them. So to do that, I have to find a way to maximize my time. Um, since personally, I struggle with, people would say I struggle with overcommitting and that I get really busy and that I really like the work I do so much that I just do so much of it, and sometimes the quality diminishes. Um, I'm not saying I believe that, but I'm saying I've been told it feels that way sometimes. Okay, I might believe it a little bit. Anyways, that's why these things are there, is because in teaching a dozen or two at this point learning communities with half a dozen teaching partners, these are things that sometimes I've thought about, or I've brainstormed with other people, or I've heard in conversation or at conferences, that are meant to embody a mindset. And so here's really the big key. Sorry for all that preamble. um, these practices are meant to create a more streamlined teaching experience for faculty, aiming at working together, whether they're being given additional funding to do so or not. These practices can help faculty align their normal faculty obligations to better support integrated work. This is a mindset. The list of practices isn't exhaustive, and it's meant to embody the mindset of integration for instructors to minimize faculty burden and decrease the sense of burnout when engaged with LCs as what they might see as added work. And so this is where there's more context we could give about trying to advocate with administration or other faculty leaders. But really, this is about just talking about the tool. So that mindset is, we want to decrease the things that feel like work. And we want to maximize our energy, especially if we're in a partnership with another teacher. So some of these things could look like, I've got to have 5 hours of office hours available to students. So if I can make that schedule align with a teaching partner, why not? Right? And we know that students sometimes don't come to office hours. So that could mean is it a benefit to trying to align those office hours with somebody? Absolutely. I could either do what I normally do and work alone in my office, or I could sit in the same room as them, or share an online video meeting that one of us spends the energy to set up because we're good with technology, and another of us says we'll take the initial connection with students when they show up, so that there's a balance of workload. And so these are things, both of us were going to do office hours, so we've maximized some of the logistics there. And now we have a little bit of community. If we're going to grade student papers or whatever we're doing in office hours, it might be fun to just toss a question at the other person. We can take turns holding triage role for checking on students and dropout detective, or checking enrollments, or reaching out to struggling students. And so that is like, maybe in a normal course, you as a faculty member are trying to check up on your students. Well, if you're both teaching the same students, instead of having both of you check up individually, maybe you get to alternate weeks. And this week is, one teacher's turn to check dropout detective and send out that push of, hey, are you okay? Do you need support? It looks like you're struggling. And they could, if you're doing a shared Canvas shell, well, then that alignment makes even more sense, because now you can look at whether they're struggling in which side of the course. So that's a maximizing of things you're already doing. You can take turns posting weekly summaries or announcements. So that's where, or you can share that so that you're writing your own half of it and students get one message. So that, one person, it just saves just a little bit of work, or shows a shared communication that you both were going to do anyways. You can consider, if you got to eat lunch or you got to eat breakfast and you're in the same area, or you're going to do it on campus anyways, consider sharing lunch together. You got to eat, I got to eat, let's eat together, right? So the mindset is really, what are things we're going to do anyways, but we could do together, right? Is it, if this person is someone you enjoy being around as a professional and a colleague, and you're both going to be on the same campus or in the same space or thinking in the same way or doing a similar action, just, does it take a lot of logistics to do that, and to plan a little bit of that in advance? I've carpooled with faculty, and that's on the list, I think. Consider carpooling where an option, maximizing commute time. So I've carpooled with one of my teaching co-teachers, and that was one of the best seasons for like 3 semesters. Just having someone to shoot the breeze with for 20-25 minutes, and then made our classroom interactions so much more fun. We understood each other, we got to talk about each other when the other person wasn't there, all that fun stuff. So there are all these benefits that sometimes don't show up when we're really focused on how is it being funded or how is my energy used. It's like, well, think about the places your energy's got to be used no matter what, and can I maximize that? um, you could develop shared slides, shared discussion questions, or class activities. If you're both focusing on certain gen ed outcomes, maybe you let the other class cover them, since you've got the same students, those students have received teaching in that gen ed, so you get to back off on that and lean into another one. So you get this division of labor, or coordination of labor. That's really kind of the principles, an efficiency because of coordinating the labor. And it's still about maximizing what others would see as your minimum, your required faculty obligations for the job that you're paid for. Um, so I've got the list of things on the screen. Ultimately, you can the principle is, what trades of your own strengths, preferences, or expertise can be made for your partners? Is there a barter system style where we each say, I like to do this most and you like to do that most? Can we swap? Can I do some of the technology and you do some of this other thing? Or can I do some of the building of the Canvas shell pre-semester, but you do a little more of the kind of daily grind assignment grading mid-semester, and you guys work negotiating that out again based on normal faculty obligations? That's the principle. Do we want to do shared grading conferences where one teacher grades and the other talks with the student, maximizing the logistics of scheduling? We don't have to each create our own technology for that. And if students struggle, they struggle in the same way. And so both teachers can act as support, instead of what can happen sometimes when I'm doing individual conferences and the student's texting me about their conference coming up and can't get into the technology or whatever it is. Well, if they are talking to both of us, then now that's been maximized and it runs a lot smoother. But it's work we both would have done individually anyways. All right, I'm overselling this. So that is the practices of efficiency. And whether I'm saying the words perfectly here, I hope you can hear the heart, which is, we want to find ways to make our lives more enjoyable to do learning communities by maximizing the time and making more efficient the time that we're working on things connected to LCs or in tandem with potential teaching partners. And so this is just do life together. Do the best to do life together, right? There are plenty of conversations we could have about faculty remuneration. This document isn't about that. This document is saying, we're getting paid to do a certain amount of work in a certain way. Is there any way that we can do it together? Okay. The last appendix is really expanding on those practices of consistency, and so the idea is like, what does it look like? What do LCs look like? What is the full spectrum of activity based on, whatever your funding model is, or your load distribution is, or however if you go and you do the practices of efficiency and you realize I've created an hour of space or an hour and a half of space in a week to co-teach or to facilitate enhancing a learning community because I've maximized my regular teaching. Okay, so I've got an hour a week. Can I do any of these activities to maximize that? So again, it's not that any teaching partner would be expected to do all of these, and certainly not all of these every week. These are potential activities a partner could choose to fulfill the time allocated based on whatever their funding is or whatever space they can create. So in some ways, these are just, here's something you could do to make it feel more like an LC. For some, you might not get to some of these activities until the second or third time you offer particular pairing, so use a scaffolded approach over multiple semesters to develop your LCs. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming if you're imagining the LC, and if you've heard people who have been doing LCs for like 5 years together, and they've got hip stacked and integrated policies and integrated grading and integrated teaching and daily plans overlapped where they're 10 minutes this person, 15 minutes that person, all engaged in the like super maxed out amazing version of an LC. If you're new to LCs, that can be overwhelming. So don't think of everything you could do in a semester. It's about steadily building toward this goal by doing just a steady amount of work to integrate over a series of semesters. Again, scaffolded approach style. My goal is this in 3 years, 6 semesters later. If I reverse engineer that and backwards scaffold instead of my course, I'm building a trajectory for my life for 3 years for the LC. That's the principle. So the top boxes are for people dealing with our specific funding model. And so I will just leave that for them. But the ideas here are, how do we, what are any individual activity that could take up anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes? And then do I do one of them a week? Do I do one every 2 weeks? If I'm in common intellectual experience mode, I could do one of these a semester possibly, and still be working toward that. So if you can't find an hour a week, can you find an hour a month? If you can't find an hour a month, can you find an hour a semester? Just to connect and help your students connect with other faculty or other students on campus. And I know it sounds like some, I don't know, telethon, but it's really that. Like, do you have an hour a semester? Well, that's a common intellectual experience. And if you maximize it and do a professor swap, like you might see in my on-ramp video, well, now it's not really, it's the coordinating. It's like 30 minutes of sending emails to say, is this a good day for you? Let me look at my calendar. Let me look at my schedule for the students. And you do a professor swap and it's done. It's not actually more work. It's maximizing the work. Anyway, so attend part or all of the other instructors' class. Just be present, hear their content, give them kudos, tell them they did a good job. That builds community. That makes them feel better about their stuff. And if you're in there with the class and you decide to heckle or play the model student or do the Columbo act, like, wait, I don't understand. What does this mean? Like, those are all things you could do in that moment. If you're like, I have a lunch break, I'm going to go spend it hanging out with my friend in their class. That's an option. Co-teach a class, just one. Look for a few minutes for 2 to 5 minutes to contextualize. Integrate an assignment rubric. Even if you've got different classes, that's a possibility. Like, even if you're in cohort mode or you're not even in cohort model, you could have a way where your class does part of an assignment, the other class does. But in this case, we're talking like in an LC, integrate an assignment rubric, one assignment. Integrate your Canvas shells. Align schedules to avoid overlap of major projects and exams. Develop slides, discussion questions, or class activities together. Maximizing what each of you bring to the table. Discuss curriculum pinch points. That's a 30-minute conversation even if you're not teaching the same class. But if you're in an LC, a 30-minute conversation could be all you have for that week, but it helps get that second lens. And that professional development, that professional learning community that's layered above the student learning community, is an exceptional way to grow as a teacher, because you've got people who are more involved in your lives in a way that just can't be replicated by one observation a semester by a chair or a dean or even a faculty mentor. If possible, compare performance of students, develop stacked tips over time, plan moments to reinforce. And that could be one of those like, I'm really connected with the service learning faculty, so you don't have to worry about that. I do that on my own classes already. So I'll just tag you in with the learning community and you help me figure out the best day, right? Take time to grade together and norm, coordinate syllabus policies, late work, attendance. Have the discussion so that if students ask, you know the rationale of the other person. Even if you don't agree like that it has to be that way, you can explain it to the student without undercutting the partner. Share classroom struggles with one another. It's shooting the breeze, and kind of that rap session is actually one of those bonding experiences. It works for students. It works for the Marines when they're mad at a commanding officer. Like, there's plenty of areas where that is highlighted. Create online videos together. The announcements, the content, the conversation, even the welcome video, right? We talked about the practices of consistency. Just do a video together instead of alone if you were going to do it anyways. Be visible together physically in each other's canvas shells, or in each other's canvas shells. Take time to include pictures of each other and have shared messages. Take time to include or compare and explore alternate assessment styles, because somebody else's discipline may grade differently than you. I got to do a deep dive into how exams can be done well when I was engaged in a learning community with chemistry, where we were trying to maximize the technology of scantrons. We were trying to figure out what was going wrong with the questions. And as one of my things as being a literacy and writing specialist, like part of that's the communication of the test. So I have training from my research side of developing meaningful survey questions. And so we took that as a lens to examine how some of those assessments in the chemistry class were going to look. And we had those conversations and said, okay, well, based on this principle, is this question getting at the thing you want? And that was a really fun conversation to have over a series of semesters. Consider shared grading, where one grades while the other talks to students and alternate. Share classroom struggles. We said that. What are classroom deal breakers? So any of these kind of conversations you can have. Give and get feedback. Reflect on each other's teaching. Talk about low stakes observations and feedback, right? Any way that you can do any one of these things once or twice a semester, or if you're in a funded learning community, or if you can buy time by being more efficient because of the other document, if you can buy an hour back a week by maximizing your co-teaching, but with the practices of efficiency, well, now you make room for these kinds of things. So these are resources, and the heart behind these resources is not to put more burdens on faculty, but clearly articulate what the possibilities are and provide mindsets that say, you know what, we are doing life together. We're doing our professional lives together. So is there a way we can do that more efficiently? And is there a way we can do that that allows for maximum benefit to ourselves and to our students? So that's the short version. And hey, look, it's 2:00, which means my lunch and learn is officially kind of done schedule wise. And we'll do more of these over the summer and spring, more than likely. So if you're watching this and it's 5 years later, hopefully I haven't completely gone off the rails and these are still relevant. But I hope you have a good time.